Story 1. I, 28 female, and getting tired of my boyfriend, 28 male, getting upset over inoffensive things that I say. I'm presently on a walk trying to blow off steam. My boyfriend has a habit of getting offended by something I say. Last week I said, my friend Sam wants to hang out with us soon. He wants to get to know you better. He's a good guy. We had a day-long fight about it because he said I went on and on about how Sam is a great guy after we had intercourse. It had been 20 minutes or so, but we were in bed talking, and that made me upset. We had a day of fighting where he accused me of not being sensitive enough, and I accused him of reading too much into a single sentence. This is not the first time it's happened. We've been dating for 8 months. We're a long-distance relationship for a while and had maybe 5 fights in that time, 6 months. The last 2 months we've lived together, I'm in another country and he came to live with me. Last night he was talking about when he goes back to his home country, he'll have to find a place, etc., and he doesn't know if he'll find temporary housing. I suggested he get an apartment and break his lease. I have had to do this before and will do this next year, as a matter of fact. It sucks, but that's how crap works, and we just gotta put up with it. This has turned into a day of us fighting with him accusing me of taking him for granted, taking his job flexibility for granted. He can work anywhere. Not caring enough, not being sensitive enough, you name it. That one sentence apparently had a lot of meaning to him when I was just trying to offer up some suggestions. I explained my side, listened to him, agree with him on some points, and apologized. He continued to go on about how I don't appreciate him. This is a theme in our fights. I say something wrong, he gets upset, he insults me without calling me a bad girlfriend outright, gets mad that I get upset, then says he can't tell me how he feels and how it's always his fault and paints himself the victim. I'm livid. I've done so much for him and have been nothing but grateful he's moved here for me. I never asked him to. He wanted to, and he wants to come back in a few more months when his tourist visa is up. He has always been the one saying he has the money, his job is flexible, he wants to be here. Now he accuses me of putting pressure on him because of that one sentence. I need insight, I need perspective, I need advice. Please help. It sounds to me like either this boyfriend has some serious self-confidence issues that he needs to kind of work on, maybe talk to a therapist about, and maybe you can help him out with that if he's willing to confront that. But, like, this is really kind of out of control. Or he's manipulative, and I don't want to necessarily go down that path. What I'm seeing here, it's not enough to go off of, but there are some people who will constantly make themselves look like the victim and turn anything into a little fight as a way of manipulating someone else. And that is a bit of a red flag that he's going off so much about these things. But I would try to have just some open, honest discussions with him. Like, look, I'm not trying to make you so upset, but you are blowing a lot of these things out of proportion. What is it I'm doing wrong? What can we work on? Maybe he'll come to some conclusion, but I don't know. That is pretty out of control. Story 2. Need me to send in proof of my name change? Fine, enjoy your jammed fax machine. So, I was granted a legal name change a few months ago. Long, boring story as to why. Simply put, hated the unique spelling of my first name and wanted to ditch my surname. Didn't have much trouble updating my name in most places. Social security, driver's license, insurance, yada yada. No bumps in the road until I got to the very last thing to update. My credit card. I use this particular credit card a lot. I'm self-employed and use this card to rack up travel points for flights, hotels, rental cars, etc. However, if you've ever checked into a hotel or picked up a rental car, you know the name on the card must match the name on the ID. So I called the credit card company, told I have to fill out a certain document and mail that in alongside a copy of the court document. Fair enough. 2 weeks go by, hear nothing, so call again. They say they haven't received it. I'm then informed they have a fax number that I can use to send in the document. So I fax in everything necessary using an app on my phone. After 2 weeks go by, still nothing. I called again. Same spiel on the other end of the phone. Please mail or fax. You get the deal. I once more did what they asked, yet another week passes. I call again, told the same damn script. I'm starting to get annoyed by this point. I have an upcoming trip planned and need the card to match my ID, so I asked to speak to a manager. They give me some BS of a manager not being currently available. Anyways, I faxed in the document and court order once again. However, this time I decided I was just going to keep hitting send after the previous one had shown as delivered. I thought I'd repeat the process a few times just to make sure they got it. After sending it 25 times the first day, I got no response. Next day I was sitting on my couch watching football. Thought I'd send the fax a few more times. By the time I realized how many times I'd hit send, I had sent it over 130 times. The very next afternoon, I got a call from a manager at credit card company. She sounded quite angry over the phone. I just played dumb. You guys asked me to fax it in. I got my updated card in the mail 3 days later. Can we all just admit that the vast majority of credit card and financing companies absolutely suck? They suck so bad, and they will try to find just any reason to make you miserable, I think, just to somehow try and get fees out of you for being late on something or doing something wrong. The way they are run is infuriating, and I don't say this just because I've recently been dealing with one, and oh yeah, your auto payment's set to go through. Here's a reminder in your email, your auto payment's about to go through for your monthly payment, and then I get a notification a few days after my payment was due, oh, your payment's late. Why didn't you just set up auto payment? And I go in there, and it shows, oh, the auto payment's all set up for next month. I asked... I can't stand them. I'm not blaming the employees or even necessarily some of the managers and stuff. I think the companies are just built to be torture machines to squeeze money out of people, and I hate them. Story 3. Petty revenge of an 8-year-old me took a bigger turn than the one I expected. When I was 8 years old, in my grade was another girl who was not liked by many peers. She was mean and stuck up, and she would make some mean-spirited pranks on others. I was regularly on bad terms with her. Once I got very sick with a respiratory illness and needed an inhaler and rest. When I was allowed back to school, I was excused from gym class and had my inhaler with me. At the end of the day, the girl took my inhaler and told me she'd give it back if I ran 5 times around the football field, which I did. I ended up crying as I couldn't breathe properly. My mom called her mom to tell her about the prank, and she got grounded, but it wasn't enough for me, and decided to go for an indirect vengeance. This girl loved makeup. She would steal it from other girls and say she found it around. I had a set of lip gloss I was given for my birthday, but wasn't allowed to use it. I took the pink one and emptied half of it. I refilled it with a bright pink nail polish, one that was very hard to get off and usually left the nails tainted for many days. I also put some glue drops in it and mixed it all together. Next day, I put the lip gloss next to the girl's backpack when no one was looking. She found it, claimed it was hers, and she found it on the floor and put it on her lips. Now, my evil childish plan was that the lip gloss wouldn't come off easily and that she'd be scolded by teachers and her mom, and the schools had a no makeup policy. But she got her lips stuck together as we were quiet in an hour-long class and she was sitting in the back. At the end of the class, she started to freak out and cry with her mouth shut. The teacher sent her to the nurse, who used alcohol and some nail remover in a cotton, I never understood why she was thinking, to remove the lip gloss, which worked, but left her lips badly cracked, terribly red, and sore. For the next few weeks she had problems with her lips, and she still tried to have chips and salty snacks, which caused a lot of pain, and she was upset about the look of her mouth. To top it all, she was scolded for using lip gloss at school. No one tracked the lip gloss back to me. It was left as someone just lost a toxic and cheap lipstick, and the girl just took it. The rules became more strict about not bringing makeup to school. Edit, since this got more attention than I expected, I'd like to add that as a child I was obsessed with experiments and mixing things, as in chemistry. I used to mix my mom's expensive perfumes together, hoping to come up with the ultimate perfume. I mixed every soda and juice to find out the taste, mixed my mom's creams, every single paint I had, so the idea of mixed makeup came to me at once. The idea of the bright pink nail polish was that it would give the lip gloss a color that could catch others' attention, and the glue was so it could remain longer on the lips and not be removed by papers so the teachers could catch her red-handed. Yeah, I will say, normally I would say oh my gosh, please don't do this. Don't trick people into putting unknown chemical mixtures on their body, especially their lips, very close to a mouth where something could be ingested, because that could be poisonous, possibly deadly. Don't do that! But the fact that an 8-year-old did this, it's okay, 8-year-olds, they're not they're not that bright. They don't know about all this stuff, so it's a little more forgivable then. In this person's mind, it's like, I'm not poisoning this person or doing something really harmful. It's lip gloss that they can't get off and they'll get in trouble. I mean, they did get in trouble, but don't do this. Story 4. Today I effed up by messing around in Singapore and getting caned as punishment. I was born in Singapore, spent most of my childhood abroad, and only moved back at 17. Maybe if I grew up there, I would have known more seriously how they treat crime and misbehavior. I didn't pay much attention in school and got involved in crime in my late teens and early 20s, eventually escalating to robbery. I didn't use a real weapon, but pretended I had one, and it worked well for a while in a place where most people are unaccustomed to street crime, until inevitably I eventually got caught. This was during the early pandemic, so they may have factored that in when giving me a comparably short prison term at only 2 years, but I think the judge made up for it by ordering 12 strokes of the cane, a bit higher than I expected. I knew it would hurt, but I had no idea how bad it actually would be. Prison was no fun, of course, but the worst was that they didn't tell you what day your caning will be. So every day I wondered if today would be the day. I started to get very anxious after hearing a couple other prisoners say how serious it is. They left me in that suspense for the first 14 months of my sentence or so until I began to try and hope, after hundreds of false alarms of guards walking by the cell for some other purpose, that maybe they'd forgotten or something, and it would never happen. But nope. Finally, I was told that today is the day. I had to submit for a medical exam, and the doctor certified that I was fit to receive my punishment. My heart was racing all morning, and finally I was led away to be caned. It's done in private, outside the sight of any other prisoners. It's not supposed to be a public humiliation event like in Sharia. The punishment rather comes from the pain. I had to remove my clothes and was strapped down to the device to hold me in place for the caning. There was a doctor there, and some officers worked to set up some protection over my back so that only my buttocks were exposed. I had to thank the caning officers for carrying out my sentence to teach me a lesson. I tried to psych myself up, thinking, okay, it's 12 strokes, I can do this. But finally, the first stroke came. I remember the noise of it was so loud, and then the pain was so shocking and intense, I cried out in shock and agony. I tried to get away, but I couldn't move. By the third stroke, I could barely think straight. I remember feeling like my brain was on fire and the pain was all over my body, not just on the buttocks. I think I was crying out, but things became blurry, and after that in my memory, I remember the doctor checking to see if I was still fit for caning at one point to give the go-ahead to continue. After the 12th stroke, they released me, but I couldn't move. 2 officers had to help me hobble off. They doused the wounds with antiseptic spray and then took me back to a cell to recover. My brain felt like it was melting from the pain, so my sense of time is probably a bit distorted from that day, but I remember collapsing down in the cell and either passed out or went to sleep. But little did I realize that the real punishment of caning is more the aftermath than the caning itself. When I woke up, the pain was still incredibly intense, but not so much that it was distorting my mind, which almost made it worse in a way. My buttocks had swollen immensely, and any pressure on it felt like fire that immediately crippled me, almost worse than a kick to the groin. My first time, I felt like I had to use the toilet. I was filled with dread because of the pain. I managed to do it squatting instead of sitting, but still, just the motion of going, number 2, agitated at all the wounds, and the pain was so sudden and intense that I threw up. I tried to avoid eating for a week because I didn't want to have to use the toilet. After a couple days, the officer told me that I couldn't lay naked in my cell anymore and had to wear clothes. This was scary because they would agitate the wounds. I spent most of the day trying to lay face down and totally still because even small movements would hurt so bad as the clothes rustled against it. This continued for about a month before things started to heal, and even then, these actions remained very painful, just not cripplingly painful. I don't sit or lay on my back for many months. By the time I got out of prison, I had mostly recovered, but even to this day, there are severe scars and the area can be a bit sensitive. It was way worse than I expected the experience to be. I know it's my fault, but I do wish my parents had warned me more about the seriousness of justice here when we moved back, though I know I wouldn't have listened as a stupid teen. Thankfully, they were supportive when I got out, and I'm getting back on my feet, literally and metaphorically. Hey folks, quick content warning from future me who has just read this story. This contains some pretty disturbing description of a caning punishment, and so if you're sensitive to that, triggered by that, you may want to scroll over to the time code on screen here to skip this story, because it's a little intense. Story 5. Revenge on a client who tried to throw me under the bus. I was pushing 40 and I'd learned a lot of lessons in more than 10 years of legal practice, but one of the most important lessons I learned was from an older lawyer that I worked for as a summer student after the second year of law school. A lawyer has 3 duties, he told me. First to himself, second to the court, and last to the client. Always make sure you come first and the client comes last. The reason? Because clients will F you, he said. They'll throw you under the bus without thinking twice. I should have stayed with this lawyer, but being young and an idiot, I had to go work downtown, and I'm still downtown now, but fortunately for me, I remembered this lesson, and it came in handy many years later when a client really did try to throw me under the bus. My client was this mid-sized company that did this, and owned things here and there. Not big enough to be listed, but it did have a pretty sizable real estate portfolio. And one day, a building they owned burned to the ground. The company wanted to collect on the insurance, so they told Frank, a veteran salaryman, to deal with it. Frank was close to 60 and thought he knew what he was doing. He didn't need me to help him with the insurance claim, he told me. He had everything under control. Besides, lawyers are expensive. Some guys really get off on not paying legal fees, and Frank was one of those guys who gloated over every penny that he managed not to pay to the lawyers. I deal with Frank a lot, and he was always nickel and diming me. The insurer is going to F you, I told Frank. It was only by luck that I even knew about the fire and the loss because Frank had not asked for my help. He just let it slip one day, and since then I kept on top of him, trying to get him to smarten up. I'd had to fight to get him to send me the proof of loss form to make sure he hadn't messed that up. Frank effed up a lot, and I wondered sometimes how he had a job. But the proof of loss was okay at least, so that was one less thing to worry about. You don't know that, he said. I could tell he just wanted to get me off the phone. I'm paid to know when insurers are trying to screw my clients, I said. And the insurer is going to screw you. They've been stringing you along for ages with requests and questions and paperwork, but they aren't going to pay you, not unless you sue them. But Frank said he knew what he was doing, that it was all under control, and besides, he got along with the adjuster so great. The limitation period expires in 2 weeks, I said, and once that 2 weeks pass, it will be too late to sue. The moment that limitation period expires, they will stop taking your calls. You'll get a final email saying, sorry, you're out of time, and that will be that. Don't leave this to the last minute. Let me sue right now, and you'll have the money in no time. Frank was like, sure, fine, whatever. Don't bother me. I got this, blah, blah, blah. And he got off the phone as soon as he could. I sent him the usual email with clear warnings and recommendations, which he ignored. I sent the email again and then again as the limitation period approached, and again a couple of days before the deadline. I'm going to be at trial, and you won't be able to reach me, my final email said, but you have to sue. You have other firms on your list, so pick one and sue. He didn't bother to reply, and I went off to do my trial. The trial lasted a couple of weeks, and no email from Frank. Then a month passed, and another month. Still no email. I figured he must have sorted things out. Maybe Frank was right after all, I said to myself. And then my phone rang. It was Frank. Remember that fire insurance thing we spoke about? We'd only spoken about it like a dozen times. I figure he was calling up to gloat, so I cut to the chase. So they paid out. That's great, Frank. You were right. He asked me what I was talking about, and could he see a copy of the claim? What claim? I said. The claim against the insurer, that claim. Does that mean the insurer didn't pay? I said. He hung up on me, and then a few minutes later my computer dinged, and there was Frank's email talking about how we spoke, and he told me to sue, and he was worried when I hadn't sent him a copy of the claim, so he was following up to get a copy of the claim. I emailed him back. I take it that the insurer didn't pay you, and like I told you they wouldn't, and now that the limitation period is expired, they told you to jump in the lake, leaving you with a loss in the millions. Is that it? I'd made a mistake by not going over Frank's head when he said he wouldn't listen to me, but if I'd gone over Frank's head, I never would have received another file from him, so I didn't. But that was then and this was now, so I CC'd Frank's boss and his boss's boss, plus I CC'd Bill, the client's in-house counsel. Bill acknowledged my email right away and called me later that day. "Frank messed up," he said. "We know that. He's an idiot, so what do we do?" So his excuses didn't work? Nope. Bill explained that they'd summoned Frank to a boardroom, but his story didn't add up given all the warnings I'd sent him. Besides, there would have been no reason for him to keep emailing the insurer if he'd told me to sue. Once the file goes to legal counsel, Frank's role was over. The company knew Frank was BSing them. "So that's it then?" Bill said. "We just lost a couple of $1,000,000? "It's okay," I said, explaining that when I realized that Frank was going to F up, I issued a claim against the insurer because I'd make Frank send me the proof of loss a while earlier. I had enough information that I could sue to preserve the cause of action. Not a great claim and short on details, but good enough. "You sued without instruction?" Bill said. Lawyers aren't supposed to sue without instructions because if you do that, you're personally liable for whatever costs the other side incurs. It's a big deal to sue without instruction. "Yep," I said. "I sued without instructions." I pulled up a copy of the claim and emailed it to him as we spoke. "It's a little rough," I said, "but we can always amend." "Thank God," Bill said. "Can I leave it with you?" Of course he could. The insurer was a sitting duck, and I knew I'd collect from them no problem. A few days later, I got a call from another guy who worked for a client, a guy I didn't normally deal with. They had a situation and needed my help. "I usually deal with Frank," I said. "What's up?" What was up was that Frank got called into another meeting and they handed him a one-page letter and then he put his little office things in a box and security walked him past his coworkers to the elevator and escorted him downstairs to the parking lot. Bye-bye, Frank. He was too old to get another job, or at least not a decent one. It was a life-changing event for Frank, but for me, he was just an anecdote, a cautionary tale that I tell younger lawyers sometimes over beers. Maybe too often because I'm getting on in years and I have my favorite stories. I wasn't trying to get revenge on Frank, not at all, and I would have felt a bit sorry for him if he hadn't been trying to throw me under the bus. The guy who replaced him was great and never nickel and dimed me, so it was all good. I don't like lawyers as much as anyone else. Lawyers can be kind of sleazy, and you don't necessarily always want to have to deal with them. But when it comes to legal matters, and they're like your paid counsel, giving you advice, legal advice, on how the law works, listen to them. Like, at least hear what they have to say and run it by some other people like, hey, should we be listening to them? Should we, do a Google search on this kind of stuff? Because I'm Frank, I'm old, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have sympathy for Frank losing his job. You got it. Law is not your specialty, Frank. Clearly. So listen to the person whose specialty it is. It's not that hard. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.